This is an examination of the hidden human condition.
This is the Hidden Killers podcast
With Tony Brueski.
We are talking with Hidden Killers daily contributor and host of the podcast Defense Diaries and defense attorney Bob Motta right now. Let's go over to Rex Heuermann a little bit. And actually, specifically, I want to talk about Police Chief James Burke, who was in charge for many years while Heuermann allegedly was out there committing these crimes. He now has been arrested for soliciting someone for sex at a park. That was just the other day. And when we look at all the warning signs, TMZ just put out a very interesting doc on Hulu, Gilgo Beach serial murders, missed warning signs. And I mean, with anything on television, you're going to have a lot of sensationalism in it. But I did think there were some very interesting interviews in that, especially with one of the victim's friends, who flat out identified Heuermann's avalanche, which everyone says there wasn't a lot of avalanches in the general area. It would have stood out a bit like a sore thumb, and described Heuermann down to a T, an ogre-like large man, the beady eyes. I mean, he had the vehicle, we had the description, which would have narrowed down to a very small percentage of the population, but nothing was really done, and this thing sat on deaf ears for so many years. It's a whole new chapter to how sad this is and how many more lives were probably lost because, in this case, there was a bad apple in law enforcement that didn't want to dig. Want to get your speculation there. Why didn't James Burke want to dig? Is it pretty obvious about his own involvement in sex work?
Yep. I think that's exactly what it is. I think that, it's strikingly similar to what went on with Gacy in terms of, but the difference is that these were young gay men back in 1970s, the early 70s, and we obviously lived in a much different world then as of the national view, especially of homosexuality back then. And, when I was interviewing all these old cops, like now, they were owning it. They were like, look, it was a bunch of gay kids. And, we just said it was a gay fight, we stayed out of it. So it's very similar to the argument that seems abundantly clear to me, which is that Burke paid it no mind because they were sex workers and he didn't value human life based on what they did for a living, which is disgusting, obviously. So, because I said it as soon as I read through the bail application, I tweeted it that it's, I was saying it on my podcast that, look, I hate to tell you, but everything that they have in this bail application, sans aside from the DNA that they got from the crust where they made the match, they had it for over a decade. Like nothing changed. That green first generation avalanche and the description of the ogre was right there. And that's probable cause. They would have found him. They would have caught him with one of his burners. They would have, the case would have been solved. So, and I was arguing, and I was getting into a lot of debates with people in terms of, potential liability for either the state and or local government in terms of if they find additional victims, in this case should have been solved. And now they're able to, basically stick Burke right in the middle of it. That it was his malfeasance and his refusal to investigate that was the direct cause of more victims being killed. It's going to be a nightmare.
Has that ever taken place before? Have we ever gone back? I know when there's been shootings and officer-involved shootings and stuff, those things are investigated and charged and tried. But something like this, where it just shows almost willful ignorance, has that been litigated before?
It's very difficult, Tony, because of governmental immunity. And it's a really hard case in court to go in and say, look, we're suing because you didn't investigate well enough. The question then becomes, was it well enough or was it not at all? Was it willful?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? To me, there's going to be attorneys out there that are going to be willing to give it a shot and to try to sue them if there's additional victims beyond what we have now. Well, you know what I'm saying? If it turns out that they get a match when they do this direct comparison in Nevada, and if that took place after the fact, he should have been in custody. She shouldn't have been killed.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So there are definitely going to be plaintiffs' attorneys out there and civil rights attorneys that are going to go out there and they'll be willing to take a shot at it. So we'll see. I mean, in terms of whether or not they're going to prevail, it is a very tough case because, it's hard to say. Like, just on normal facts, just a lousy police investigation, you're not going to be able to sue them. But if it's willful, it's different. You know what I'm saying? That's why this Burke arrest really could play huge into that whole concept, because it's going to shed a ton of light on what was going on in that department with respect to that investigation. And, if you've got multiple people involved in terms of him talking to people and either above him or below him and saying, nah, we're not going to waste any time on that. Don't worry about it. It was a, sex worker. We don't care. You know what I'm saying? So like, if that comes to light and it could be substantiated, it might have legs. So we'll see how it plays out.
This is an examination of the hidden human condition
This is the Hidden Killers podcast
with Tony Brueski.